So if I were a high-ticket coach, this is what I would build if I were currently running paid ads to scale or hit 100K a month with my coaching business. Based on 2 years of working inside ad agencies and sales agencies across multiple coaching industries. So first of all, why am I the wrong person to sell you a course, and why am I the right person to show you this, right? Because I want to be upfront about something before we dive into this, right? First of all, I am not a coach. I've never run a coaching business in my entire life, and I don't even have 100K a month screenshot to even show you right now, right? What I am is I am a direct response marketer, and for the last 2 plus years, I've been working behind the scenes inside ad agencies and sales agencies that serve coaches and consultants across different niches, right? And from that position, I've had a front row seat to something most coaches never get to see, and that is what actually happens to your leads after they opt in. Most of the time, it is nothing, right? Because I've seen businesses spending 10K, 20K, even 30K a month on paid ads. They have generated hundreds of leads and then watching those leads go cold because there was no real system on the back end to follow up with them, right? That's why I've written email sequences for clients. I've audited pipelines. I've seen what a broken backend looks like up close, and I've seen what happens when you fix it. One client I work with had show rates sitting around 50%. It's not that terrible, but it's also not that great, right? We rebuilt their backend sequences. It was nothing fancy. It was just the right emails going out at the right time. And within 60 days, their show up rate was above 70% plus, right? So everything was just the same. It was just a fixed backend. And that's the thing nobody talks about in the coaching space, because everyone's obsessed with getting more leads, and nobody's talking about what happens to the leads that they already have, right? So that's why in this video I put together this framework, what I call the call flow system, based on everything I've observed working across multiple agencies and coaching businesses. And this is what I'd build if I were in your position. So this is the problem nobody in your industry is honest about, right? And here's the conversation I see playing out consistently in the coaching space. The coach is running ads, the leads are coming in, but the revenue isn't where it should be. So what is the solution everyone reaches for, right? So it is more leads, maybe better ads, a new creative, a different audience, or maybe a higher budget, right? Though sometimes that helps, but most of the time the problem really isn't the traffic, because the traffic is already doing its job, right? The real problem here is what actually happens after the opt-in, right? Because the average coaching business right now is leaking revenue at 5 specific points in their sales process. And most coaches don't even know that these points does exist. So right now I'm going to be showing you the 5 leak points, and I'm going to walk you through each one of these very slowly, right? Because if you're running ads right now, I guarantee at least 2 or 3 of these are happening in your business today, right? So let's go to the leak number 1. The cold opt-in. So let's say when someone sees your ad, they click, they opt in, and they get a confirmation email, right? And then nothing happens. Or maybe a generic welcome sequence that reads like it was written for anyone and everyone, right? And that lead goes cold within 48 hours. They forget who you are. By the time you try to book a call with them, you're a stranger in their inbox. And this leak right here is the most common leak point for most coaching businesses. And to be honest, it is entirely preventable if you know how to do it, right? So leak number 2, the no-show. So the scenario is they've opted in, they booked a call, and they're already in your calendar. And then they don't show up, right? Industry average no-show rate for coaching calls is somewhere between 30% and 50%. And, think about it, right? If you're booking 20 calls a month, you might be losing 6 to 10 of them before they even happen. Because most coaches send one reminder email the day before, and that right there is not a pre-call sequence. It's just a hope and pray strategy, right? Because a proper pre-call sequence does 2 things, right? First, it reduces no-shows and it primes the prospect. So when they do show up, they've already halfway sold. Because you've already invested on them mentally, now they are ready to invest in your program before you even speak to them, right? So leak number 3 is the post no-show ghost. The scenario for this is the lead book, they didn't show, and you sent them a rescheduled email, but they just ignore it, right? And that's where most coaches give up because the lead gets filed under dead and just never touched again, right? You never talk about those leads ever, right? So here's the thing, someone who booked a call with you was interested enough to put it on their calendar because that's already a warm lead. They just had something, maybe they just had something come up, or they got cold feet, or maybe life just happened. That's why having a no-show recovery sequence gives you multiple chances to re-engage that lead without being annoying or desperate, right? If you do this right, it's one of the highest ROI sequences that you can have, right? Because for those people, they wouldn't have done it, booking a call with you, if they weren't interested enough to ask for your help, right? So leak number 4 is the close loss. So for this scenario, they show up to the call, you had a great conversation, but they said, I need to think about it, or, the timing isn't right, or I need to talk to my spouse. And then nothing. Most coaches follow up once, maybe twice, then they move on because it feels awkward to keep reaching out. And that's where most coaches are mistaken. Because the I need to think about it is actually rarely a no, right? Because it's usually a I need more information, or I need more time, or I need to see that you're still around in 30 days when I'm finally ready. That's the reality, guys. So a close loss sequence keeps you in front of the prospect over the next 30, 60 to 90 days, right? Professionally, without being pushy, so that when they're ready, you're the first person that they think of. So you can be staying on top of their minds until they're finally ready, right? So leak number 5 is the dead list. For this scenario, you've been running ads for a while. You already have a list. Maybe it's hundreds of leads, or maybe it's thousands, right? Most of them have never converted. They are just sitting there. And the average coach looks at that list and thinks it is already worth it, right? Because you think those people already said no, or that they've already have gone cold and there's nothing that you can do, right? But a dead list isn't actually a dead list. It is a warm audience you already paid to acquire and haven't properly followed up with, right? Because, as I've said earlier, you don't actually have a lead problem. What you have is a follow-up problem. A reactivation sequence that is done right will pull book calls out of a list that hasn't been touched in months, right? I've seen it happen, and it's not magic actually. It's just the right message at the right time. So every one of these leak points is a revenue leak. And if you're a coach and you're running ads, you're paying to fill a bucket that has 5 holes in the bottom. And the crazy part is the leads are already there and you've already been paying for them. So in this section, I'm going to be explaining to you why email is still the highest leverage channel for closing coaching clients, right? And before I'm going to walk you through the system, I want to address something that you might be thinking right now, right? You might be thinking that email is already dead, or shouldn't I be doing this on Instagram, or maybe through the DMs, or with retargeting ads? Here's the thing about email, right? With email, you own the list, right? Instagram can change its algorithm tomorrow. Meta can shut your ad account down. And your email list is an asset that you can control. Think about it, right? With email, it has the highest ROI of any marketing channel, right? Consistently for years, and the numbers don't lie, right? And for high-ticket coaching, email is where decisions get made, right? People don't spend 5K or 10K on impulse, right? High-ticket clients is doing research. They took the time to think and then come back, right? So email keeps you in front of them during that process. And when it comes to behavioral email, these are sequences triggered by what someone does or doesn't do, right? It is a different animal from a broadcast email because it is personal, right? It is timely, and it feels like you're really paying attention. DMs and retargeting in social content all have their place, but for closing leads, those high-paying clients that you've already paid to acquire, email is the engine. And most coaching businesses aren't using it properly. So now in this section, I'm going to be showing you the system that I call the call flow system, right? This is the framework I'd build if I were running a coaching business trying to hit 100K a month. So this is not just one email sequence, the traditional email marketing, but it is 6 behavioral sequences that cover every drop off point in your sales process. So each one does a specific job. Together, they make sure no leads fall through the cracks. So here's an overview of the call flow system. Number one is the lead nurture. What the lead nurture does, it warms up new opt-ins and moves them toward booking a call. Second is a pre-call sequence, right? What it does, it reduces no-shows and primes prospects before the call happens. Number three is the no-show recovery. What the no-show recovery does, it reactivates leads who missed their scheduled call. And number four, cancellation. It re-engages leads who canceled before the call even happened, right? Next is the closed lost follow-up, right? So what it does is follows up with prospects who said no or went quiet after a call, right? And number six is the dead list reactivation. So what it does, it wake up cold leads who haven't engaged in weeks or months. For the last one is the closed one or LTV. What it does is it onboards new clients, it drives retention, upsells, and generates referral. So now those are the 7 sequences inside the call flow system. Now let me give you a high-level picture of what each of this is doing and why it matters. I'm not going to walk you through the exact emails, but that would take another hour, and honestly, that's a different conversation for now. But I want you to understand the logic behind each of these 7 sequences, right? So first, let's go to the lead nurture, right? This is the sequence that fires the moment someone opts in, right? So for the first 48 to 72 hours after an opt-in are the highest engagement window that you'll ever have with a lead, right? Because they've just raised their hand and they are curious and they're paying attention within those hours. Most coaches waste this window with a generic welcome to my world email that talks about themselves for 3 paragraphs, right? But what a proper lead nurture sequence does is something different because it immediately speaks to the specific problem that made them opt in, and it builds trust fast and it moves them toward booking a call while they're still warm, right? So the goal for the lead nurture sequence isn't to educate, but it is to create enough certainty that they take the next step. The second one is the pre-call sequence. So once a call is booked, most coaches go silent until the day before, maybe sending one reminder, right? But that right there is not a pre-call sequence. That's just hoping that those leads show up. Because what a pre-call sequence does is 2 things simultaneously. First, it reduces no-shows by keeping the call top of mind, right? Not just reminders. It is actual value-driven emails that reinforce why this call matters and what they're going to get out of it, right? Second is it pre-sells. So by the time that they get on the call, and what a good pre-call sequence does is it has already done half of your sales job because they've already know who you are, they've seen enough proof, and they've already understand the framework that you have. So that's why they are coming in already warm. Third is the no-show recovery, and this is the most underutilized sequence in the coaching space because most coaches send one rescheduled email and it gets ignored and write the lead off, right? But think about what it means to book a call, right? That person had to see your ad, to click, opt in, and get in your calendar and then show up. They were interested enough to go through all of that, and a no-show isn't a dead lead. Always take note of that. It is a warm lead who had something that just come up, right? That's why a no-show recovery sequences re-engages them over multiple touch points without being desperate or pushy. It acknowledges that they missed the call, it reframes the value, and it makes it easier for them to revoke. So if this is done right, then this sequence alone can recover a significant percentage of your monthly no-shows. People who were already close to the decision. So number 4 is a cancellation sequence. A cancellation is actually a softer no-show, right? They didn't just forget, they made an active decision to not show up. And that tells you something. But what it usually means are one of 3 things, right? They get cold feet, they had an objection that wasn't handled before the call, or maybe life just genuinely got in the way. So a cancellation sequence handles all 3 of those possibilities, right? It is shorter than the no-show recovery, but a lot more direct. It acknowledges this cancellation without making them feel guilty. It reframes the value quickly and gives them a clear path to reschedule. Number five is the close lost follow up sequence. So this is the sequence for everyone who got on a call and didn't close, right? Those I need to think about it people, no, the timing isn't right people. They let me talk to my spouse people, right? Most coaches treat these leads as dead, but they're not. They're actually some of your warmest leads because they've already made time for you. They got on a call, they heard your pitch, and the objection wasn't actually no. It was not yet. A closeout sequence keeps you present without being aggressive and it delivers value, handles common objections through content and creates natural re-entry points over the next 30 to 90 days. Number six is the dead list reactivation sequence. So this is where you go back to everyone who's been sitting cold in your list, people who opt in weeks or months ago but never converted. The instinct is to ignore this list. It feels like lost cause territory, but remember these people opt in, right? They saw your ad, they clicked and gave you their email address, and that's more than you can say about most of the internet. And a reactivation sequence done well is one of the highest ROI things that you can do because there's zero ad spend involved. You're monetizing leads you already paid for, and the right message at the right time with the right hook, and you'll pull book calls out of a list that's been silent for months. And the last one is the closed one or the LTV sequence. Most coaches treat the close as the finish line, and it's not because it's the starting line of the highest value relationship in your business. And a closed one sequence has three jobs, right? And most coaching businesses are doing none of it. First one is retention. The first 30 days after someone pays you are the most critical for the entire coaching relationship because buyer's remorse is real, right? If a new client doesn't feel immediately confirmed in their decision through strong onboarding emails, clear next steps, and quick early wins, then they start to disengage. A proper onboarding sequence reduces early churn, reduces no shows on kickoff calls, and sets the tone for everything that follows. The second job of a close one sequence is the upsell. As a client moves through your program, there are natural moments where they're most open to going deeper, right? When they hit their first win, when momentum is building at the halfway point, when they're approaching the end and don't want to lose progress. A well timed upsell sequence is not a hard pitch, it's just a natural next step, right? It converts a percentage of existing clients into higher ticket continuity or premium offers. And these are your easiest sales because trust is already fully established. And the third job is referrals, right? Who doesn't want referrals? A happy client of yours is your best marketing asset. But most coaches never formally ask for referrals or they ask at the wrong time and they got nothing. Because a referral sequence fires at peak satisfaction moments. When a client just hit a milestone or when they're in the window where they genuinely love to share what's working. So if this is done right, then it generates warm introductions without ever feeling transactional. So the combined effect of retention, upsell, and referrals on your LTV per client is significant. So a client who stays longer, they upgrades, and they refer to two friends is worth 5 to 10 times what they paid on the front end. So all this together, these seven sequences closed every gap in your sales process. So for every lead that opts in, they get followed up. For every no-show, they get a recovery attempt. And for every close lost leads gets a second chance. Every dead lead gets reactivation. Every new client gets onboarded, they get retained and then upsold. And for every happy client, they become a referral source. So overall, nothing is leaking, right? So let me walk you through a simple scenario so this stops being abstract. So let's say you're spending 5K a month on ads, right? You're generating 100 leads a month and your show up rate is sitting at 40%, which is pretty standard if you have no backend sequences in place. And that's already 40 calls. You close 20% of those 5K per client, and that's 8 clients and 40,000 in revenue. But now let's say a proper pipeline gets your show up rate to 65% with the same ad spend leads an offer. And that right there is 65 calls. You still close 20% at 5K, but that's already 13 clients at 65K in revenue. You just got 25K more in monthly revenue with the same ad spend, leads, and closing rate. It's not actually a scaling problem, but a leaking problem. And that's just the show up rate improvement. What more could it be, right? That doesn't account for the close lost follow up, converting people who said no, or the dead list reactivation pulling calls from leads that should written off, or the cancellation sequence recovering people who would have disappeared entirely, right? So the point here is that the money is already in your pipeline and you just need a system to collect it. So the next thing that we're gonna talk about is who does this system works for and who it doesn't, right? Because I want to be specific here and because this isn't for everyone, right? So this is for you if you're already running paid ads. You're currently running Meta, YouTube, or maybe both, right? You've been generating leads but they're not converting at the rate that they should. Or your show up rates are inconsistent or lower than 60%. Or maybe you have a list of cold leads and you haven't properly followed up with, right? And you're spending money on ads every month and leaving back end revenue on the table. You want a system that works without you manually chasing every lead. And this probably isn't for you if you're not currently running any paid ads yet, right? So you need to get traffic first, then build the back end. Or maybe you don't have an offer that's converting at all because email won't fix a broken offer. Or you're looking for a shortcut that replaces doing the actual work, right? So the coaches who get the most out of this are the ones who already have the front end working and are frustrated that their back end isn't keeping up. So what are we gonna do next, right? Because I've actually put together a free guide on the call flow system, breaking down what goes into more detail on each of those sequences, what they look like when they trigger, and what they're designed to do. So if you want that, just DM me the word pipeline in my Instagram and I'm gonna send it over. So now if you're already past the free guide stage and you just want someone to build this up for you, the done for you, full installed system, then DM me Apex and we'll talk about what that looks like. Either way, stop leaving money in your pipeline that you've already paid for those leads. Adios.